Get started. I'll get there. Okay, welcome to our Community Development Committee. It's 6:31. Now is a good opportunity for any public comments. If there's anyone in the audience who is here on something that's not on the agenda, this would be the time to come up to the podium. Seeing no takers, unfortunately. We will move on to public presentations. First up, we have a presentation on the SMAC establishment of Watershed Organizations.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Johnson County staff is here tonight to talk to you about a strategic plan that they began in 2016 for their Stormwater Management Program. And as a result of that, they've recommended and are implementing a watershed-based approach for stormwater. As you know, cities traditionally independently manage their stormwater projects, but there were geographical constraints, and as you know, stormwater has no boundaries. So this watershed-based approach, by establishing watershed organizations, will hopefully result in a more collaborative approach. So tonight, please help me welcome our Johnson County staff. I have Brian Pedwick, Johnson County's Public Works and Infrastructure Director.
Sure.
Lee Kellenberger, Stormwater Program Director, and Madison Crow, Project Engineer. And you just started with a Stormwater Management Program a couple months ago?
About 5 months ago.
And you're a graduate of KU? So we have great staff, and I've worked with Lee and Brian in the past, and they're great resources and wonderful to work with. So please help me welcome them.
Very good introduction. Thank you. That was well said. So again, thank you guys for the opportunity to come talk tonight. We're here tonight to kind of give you guys an update on our strategic plan implementation process, and specifically on the watershed-based approach. But we're going to also cover a lot of the other changes that the program is going to be implementing over the next few months. So we've been giving this same presentation to all the city councils. I think you guys are maybe like the 13th or 14th, at least, city council I've been to present some of this information. So, but I've saved the best for last. The Stormwater Management Program. Before I get into some of the changes, I thought I'd just take a few minutes to kind of cover some of the history of why we were created, or when we were created, and what kind of work we do and have done in the past. So, going all the way back 30 years ago, a little before that actually, the Kansas legislature authorized counties to implement a 1/10 of 1 cent retail sales tax, and for the purpose of funding stormwater management and flood control projects. The city of Mission has been the benefactor of some of those sales tax dollars in the past, actually. So, when the county had implemented the tax back in 1990, they created the Stormwater Management Program and the Stormwater Management Advisory Council. Each city has one vote on the Advisory Council. The Advisory Council is comprised of one representative from each of the 20 cities. So, your voting representative right now is Celia Duran. So, we meet annually, go over recommended expenditures and, with the council, and we ultimately recommend those to the Board of County Commissioners. So, it's been a great program. We're in our 30th year now. The tax has generated about $300 million worth of sales tax, and we've leveraged an additional about $90 million from the cities because they're required to put in 25% share. So, in total, we conservative estimate we've probably made about a $400 million investment through this program over the last 30 years in Johnson County. So why change? Starting back in around 2014, 2015, we were starting to see that the number of cities participating in the program was starting to dwindle, and also some of the needs we were hearing from some of our cities that were starting to change. They had different needs than what the program is currently addressing. So we thought it would be a good time, since the program hadn't been looked at strategically for quite some time, to stop and take a look at what is the state of the practice in stormwater. So we embarked on a strategic planning exercise, and during that exercise there was 4 main components to it. We basically interviewed all the stakeholders, which are our 20 cities, and said, what do you like about the current program, as it exists today, what don't you like about the current program. We did a national benchmarking exercise to look at similar programs throughout the country, and said what kind of services or programs do those programs address, and then we did a gap analysis. Where we are today, where should we be, and then strategies were formulated to try to close those gaps. So we are now in, well, before I move on, I will reference this list here of the folks that were involved on that strategic plan steering committee, and one name jumps out at you probably is your own Celia Duran was on that committee when she was with the city of Olathe.
Right.
So, subsequently, the recommendations and stuff that I'm going to go over tonight cover are a direct result of that strategic planning exercise. So, many of us have probably done strategic plans in the past. They're kind of at a 50,000 foot level. They don't have a lot of meat on the bone. They just have some strategies and recommendations in them. And we quickly found out that that was really the easy part. So we spent the last 3.5 years trying to implement the recommendations of that plan, and it has not been an easy task, and we've had a lot of help. So this kind of shows the general timeline that we've worked over since 2016 when the SMAC and the Board of County Commissioners approved the strategic direction. We've been working on a watershed-based approach, as Celia mentioned, and we'll go into tonight. We've also been looking at funding new elements and new different types of projects through our program. And then finally over here today, where we're at today, was we're updating our policies and procedures and implementing some of those recommendations currently. So one more background slide, and I alluded to this, was the number of cities and stuff that have actually been involved in this. So not only during the strategic plan, but we've had subcommittees formed after subcommittees to formulate the recommended approaches on how we're going to formulate these watershed organizations, how they're going to be organized and structured. Every step of the way we've had city involvement. So this has been thoroughly vetted through the subcommittee process. So we're not coming to you today up here from Johnson County saying this is how it's going to work. It's really been a grassroots effort. And I really, not only the other staff at the county, but also all the staff at the cities have really endorsed this and is what the way forward. So, all right, so our new program direction. The first change we're going to cover is how we're organized, and it's no secret we're going to be reorganizing the program on a watershed basis. So, as you know, in the past, cities worked with the county directly. They would come up with, they would identify a flooding problem in their city. The onus would be on the city, though, to initiate that project, to kind of come up with a solution to their project within the confines of their jurisdictional boundaries. So that worked fairly well, but there's been some instances in recent history that we've actually, come up with a better way, and we've all kind of come to the consensus that the watershed-based approach is better for several reasons. One is, under the current approach, upstream communities contribute to the flooding problem, but there's no mechanism for them to have to participate in the project if it's downstream, and vice versa. If a upstream city is solving a flooding problem and the downstream communities receive benefit, there's no way for the downstream community, there's no mechanism for them to have to participate. So it really doesn't account for the way that natural systems flow and work. So hence the watershed-based approach. We had a subcommittee formed around this, and they have, one of their first tasks was to sit down with the map of the county and delineate or group the different watersheds into these organizations, the 6 organizations shown here. So we have 6 watershed organizations. One city mission is going to be in Watershed Organization 1. That includes Turkey Creek and Brush Creek, and Rock Creek as a tributary to Brush Creek. Watershed Organization 2 is Indian Creek and Tomahawk. 3 is the Blue River. 4 is the Meridocene River. And 5 is the Captain and Kill Creeks out in western Johnson County. So those are the 6 watershed-based organizations. So what does this mean to you? It's going to mean a little bit of a change in how the cities interface with the Stormwater Management Program. Down here you'll see there's 6 blue boxes. In the past there would have been 20 blue boxes down here. Each city would have had been on their own basically. But now that we're categorizing and grouping you into 6 watershed organizations and based on common drainage area and the development in your communities are consistent. So that will be the new structure. We are also formulating a new committee, the Watershed Advisory Committee, and that will be comprised of the 6 chairs of each watershed organization. So the watershed organizations will have 1 voting representative from each city in your organization. They'll elect a chair, a vice chair, a secretary. They will meet to formulate and work on their watershed master plan and implement projects, formulate projects. Those projects on an annual basis will be probably put forth to the Watershed Committee that will go through one more check before it ultimately goes to the Stormwater Management Advisory Council for final overall approval and recommendation to the Board of County Commissioners. So, and then also identified by this green box here is the Stormwater Management Program. We're going to continue to help facilitate all this and facilitate the meetings, make sure that that rules are being followed, for example, and that standards are still being designed to certain standards. So we are not going away in any way, shape, or form. We'll still be there to help you out as we always have in the past. This is just one extra level of coordination and collaboration. So,
May I ask a question
Go
before you?
ahead.
So who will actually, who will the Stormwater Management Advisory Council include?
good question. So the Stormwater Management Advisory Council, as it exists today, will not change. It's simply going to have the 1 voting representative from each city. You may elect to make that also your voting representative on your Watershed Advisory Committee or in your watershed organization, or you may choose a different person, or you may send several staff to those committee meetings. I mentioned the municipalities will be the only voting representatives on the watershed organizations, but we encourage you to invite ex officio members, whether it be large property owners or other community members that may have an interest in stormwater management to participate in that as ex officio. They won't have full voting rights, but they can still participate. Ideas like school districts, parks and recreation districts, other people that have maybe land holdings or something that you may want to do a project in coordination with them, but we still didn't want to open it up for just any entity to come to the program and try to pursue funding. So all of our funding will still be city-based, and we'll have to have a city administer a project. We are not going to take dollars away from the cities and go off and fund projects with other entities. Our statute doesn't allow that.
So if you have 3 or 4 cities in one particular watershed district, when they're applying for funding, I'm presuming the funding goes with each watershed district, that they'll work together to put a funding package together for that district?
Right.
City?
So a little bit more on the watershed-based approach. So for example, City A, there's a flooding problem in City A, let's say City B. So City B has the flooding problem. There is, if in the old system, that city would be on their own to come up with a solution. The watershed-based approach, that solution may look very different. We may be doing a part of the project, maybe upstream into City A, which would reduce the cost to City B, or vice versa. It may be a combination of projects. So we're hoping that in the next section I'll cover the watershed master planning we're going to help facilitate this and give you guys a roadmap. The watershed organization is kind of a roadmap of where all the problems exist today, potential solutions for those problems, and then the cities can really work together to kind of start putting together and formulating projects and pursuing funding through their watershed organizations. So this is just a tabular format of that same map you'll see there. You do have 12 cities in your watershed organization. You are the largest one. Just due to the nature of your cities, you have much smaller cities. So Brush and Turkey Creek shown here, and there's Mission. So those are the folks that you probably work with quite a bit anyways in Northeast Johnson County and familiar with. And they also all flow to either Brush Creek or Turkey Creek. So the next number of slides are going to talk more programmatic changes. So I mentioned flooding quite a bit, and flooding has always been the bread and butter of our program. It will continue to be a large focus for our program moving forward. But some of the other elements that came out of our strategic plan was the need for funding to address things like water quality, funding to address things like system maintenance or replacing underground assets, and then just to help overall more global coordination and planning. So the first element, like I mentioned, was this flooding. We're going to continue to fund that. The project prioritization methodology is going to change slightly. We heard from the cities that they would like more emphasis placed on street flooding versus private property flooding. So the way the points and stuff are scoring towards projects will change slightly, but I'm not going to go into that tonight. But there's also other elements that were identified that we're going to be implementing in the future. I don't have those ready today, but there's a need for a standalone home buyout program, for example, so that in the past there was never been a mechanism to buy out an existing property when it comes up for sale, like an opportunistic program on a voluntary basis. So there was a need identified through the strategic plan to set up a program like that. Also something as simple as maybe a homeowner's technical assistance program. There's nothing that we at the county or the city can really do, but if they just had a little bit of help, they maybe could address some of their drainage issues on their property themselves. So those are other elements we're looking at in the future. The next big new item, the first big new item of the program is looking to address in the future is water quality improvements. So we've all have NPDES Phase 2 permits. The City of Mission has when you have to meet certain minimum control measures for KDHE. And we've done a pretty good job about that. But moving forward, I think that there's even a more of a role that we can play to help cities really not just maintain the status quo, but actually try to make improvements in water quality and habitat. So we're going to make dollars available in the future through things that reduce pollution and runoff, reduce stormwater runoff volumes, protect stream banks, restore stream banks, and riparian areas. So that's a new element to the program. Another new element to the program that I mentioned is the System Management Program. And I think that Watershed Organization 1 is going to be a large recipient of this funding. A lot of the oldest stormwater infrastructure in the county is up here in Northeast Johnson County, just where we were built up here the earliest. So, and we have sinkholes forming every time we get a heavy rain up here in Northeast Johnson County. So we're standing up a program and actually have funding available today for helping cities replace underground pipes. Now, it is not a pass-through program. It's a merit-based program. We're going to try to address the highest needs in the county first. So we're working with the cities to help them inventory their systems and get condition assessments done underground so that we can, rather than just giving each city a certain allocation of the dollars, we want the cities to invest in some of their system as well, and we're looking for them to go out and at least map it, come up with a condition score so that then we can evaluate the risk and the relative risk of that project versus another project so we can compare apples to apples. So the risk score is based on the consequence, not only the likelihood of failure of the condition, but it also has a consequence of failure score. So if there is a pipe underneath Johnson Drive that's in imminent danger of collapsing, that's going to have a lot higher consequence of failure than a pipe that may be underneath a small cul-de-sac off on a residential street. So that's the factors that we're trying to weigh into that. So we can put the county dollars where we're getting the most return. So there's our system management program, and then the last element that we will be changed. The program is trying to take more of a leadership role in as the overall planning. I mentioned the watershed master plans; those are currently underway, and we're working with the cities to glean as much everything stormwater you guys have done for the last 20 years. Assemble all the data, identify any additional flooding problems, erosion problems, master plans that you may have at your city level, CIP programs, and we're trying to assemble that into one watershed holistic document that kind of lays out all the issues so that we can see it through the watershed lens, and then so we can start looking at watershed scale solutions. We're not looking at it through a narrow lens of a city, where we're looking at taking a step back. No one city would be responsible for that, so where the county is taking the leadership role in the master planning effort. So in summary, some of the programmatic changes that are going to be implemented is the shift from a local scope to the watershed scope that I mentioned. And the next three elements here are kind of some of the changes in our funding levels that we're recommending, that have been recommended and approved by the board. So I mentioned system replacement projects. Currently there's $0 in our program for system replacement. As of 2020, we will do 50% cost share on system replacement projects for projects that meet that risk threshold that's been identified. So we're receiving applications as of January 1st. The next item is the flood damage reduction projects. Those historically have been 75-25 cost share, 75% county, 25% city. Moving forward, there's going to be a tiered funding level. The majority of projects are going to be reduced down to 50-50 cost share. But however, there will be some projects that will be elevated to 100% cost share, that if the county did not step in and fund the project, or it's at a scale that only the county could probably make it happen, there will be an element or category of projects that will constitute or qualify for 100% county funding in the future as well. And again, that's been a recommendation of the strategic plan and the subcommittee. So, and then the same for water quality improvements. Currently, no dollars today for water quality improvements. Moving forward, we're going to have that tiered approach where 100% for highly unique projects that, if not for the county's involvement, wouldn't get funded. 50-50 cost share for all other water quality improvement projects. And finally, we're going to be putting more of a focus on alternative financing in the future. We've done a great job of putting the dollars where they should go, and we are really kind of the alternative financing for the cities. You guys like to take our money, but we need to do a better job at the county level to leverage that 16 or 17 million we get every year, and try to leverage and bring in an additional 5-10 million from out either state or federal or nonprofit agencies to try to bring more dollars to the county and leverage our dollars to bring in outside resources. With that, so a few more next steps. The Watershed Organizations have been established as of January 1st. In Watershed Organization 1, I think you were the only ones that haven't adopted it yet or executed your agreement. So, and then there's 3 others, I believe, in Johnson County that we're waiting on, but all of them are moving forward in different various forms. So Watershed Organizations will be established. The Watershed Master Planning is underway. I mentioned the master plan. We are working with staff and getting your guys' documents, data, GIS layers. There's also an opportunity for the city, for your residents to participate in the master planning process, specifically through a online survey that we're conducting, and it's through Map Social. So it's an online app where they can type in their property address. It brings up a map of their property. They can describe the flooding concern that they have, or the stormwater concern, or the erosion concern that they have on their property, or that they know of in their neighborhood, and they can upload photos to it. So we're trying to glean as much information, not just from the cities, but also from all of the residents in Johnson County as well. So that's gone out via social media. It's been in the print and through on some local media coverage as well. So, and I will share that with your staff so that you guys can share it in your city newsletter as well. So that survey will continue to be ongoing through next spring. So we encourage you to try and get the word out to your residents so that they can share that information as well. And finally, just some policy procedure updates and some other procedural changes that we're doing to allow all of us to work with our Board of County Commissioners. So with that, I will stop and ask if there's any questions. Sure.
The geography of these organizations is quite similar, one from the other.
Right.
How are the funds going to be allocated in terms of the large versus small geographies and so forth?
So, a great question, and I apologize, I don't have a better blown up map here, but when you say geographies, you're saying the square miles or the land area associated in each one. So, that's a great question. In the existing program, there's never been an allocation-based program. It's never been each city is guaranteed a certain piece of the pie. It's always been a merit-based program, and it will always continue to be a merit-based program. In any given year, all the money could go to the city of Shawnee if they have the highest ranked projects through our scoring system. In the future, all the money can go to Watershed Organization 1 in any given year, or Watershed Organization 2. It's always going to be let's everyone submit their projects. Let's rank them according to our agreed upon ranking system and scoring methodology, and then see where you fall out. So, and we work to develop funding. Now, through alternative funding, you may have a grant or something, for example, that is only going to be available that pops up that may elevate your project to a higher level than it would normally otherwise be. So there's some nuances in and the funding strategies moving forward, but just know that it's always been merit-based, it will continue to be merit-based. So we always put the county's dollars where the highest need is, or where the biggest. So what we've moved to is reduction, risk reduction. So we try to spend our dollars where we get the greatest risk reduction to our residents.
Yeah, I have a quick question.
Yeah.
Have you seen the watershed model be successful in comparable counties and theirs?
Right, so the watershed-based approach is relatively new to stormwater management. I think that we've kicked it around here in Johnson County for 10 plus years, I think. We tried piloting it in Rock Creek actually, and that kind of was the precursor to where we are today. So a lot of communities work really well and do watershed planning for water quality purposes, and they seem to work together to meet NPDES requirements or water quality permit requirements. Nobody has really done a great job of it yet on asset management, on flood control, but so we're kind of breaking new ground here. Yeah. Yeah.
I had a question about the matching funds, and I know that according to the materials we received, everything has to go through the watershed now, right? Even if it's a single city project versus
Yeah.
a watershed project.
Mhm.
So for the matching funds, how does that work for a watershed project as compared to a single city benefit project?
So we wanted to retain the ability for a city to initiate a local drainage project, or a city that maybe you guys have a project that meets our minimum program requirements, that it doesn't have involve any other cities, it's all within the scope of mission. It doesn't really impact anybody else but you. So you still have the ability to submit a project on a project like that. And when we say go through the Watershed Organization, it's just a courtesy check at maybe the first meeting of every year. Everyone puts forth their projects. As long as it meets our minimum program requirements, a valid project in our eyes. We're asking though that just for coordination purposes and for transparency, that so everyone can see what's going on in the watershed. And we also hope that there's some cities that don't have stormwater utility, don't have dedicated stormwater dollars. So that they see that the city of Mission is consistently receiving funding because they have a stormwater management fee or something, and their city is continuing to never have success getting funding because they don't have any match, that this will also help elevate everyone's design standards, elevate their funding strategies, and more consistency and more uniform approach to stormwater management, so that it's a lot of cities, it's out of sight, out of mind until a problem pops up. So
But what about if it's a watershed project?
if it's a watershed project, it's to be determined. We don't have any watershed projects. The master plans will have to be completed at the end of 2020, and those will really kind of scope out potential watershed-based solutions, and those will be our first projects that we really look to. And we'll use our master plans to kind of delineate or kind of help us determine what really constitutes 100% funding, or what is a watershed-based project. Does it have to require multiple jurisdictions involved? Does it have to have a certain drainage area to it? So, but the thought is that those get over here, put on they're up here on the county's eyes, they're on their own list, and they're in another tier of funding. So those projects will probably get funded first, and then if there's money left over, local drainage projects will be funded.
They're all 100% matched, the watershed projects?
The watershed base.
Okay.
Yeah.
Are there any watersheds in particular that seem to be kind of like the biggest areas of concern or lowest hanging fruit that you know of on the horizon that we might need to consider, or that the county's considering as like an area they really want to focus on?
Right. So we've had some significant rains in Johnson County, notably 2017. You probably saw the flooding on Indian Creek and Troch's Bar on the Missouri side. That one pops into mind as it's probably going to be, now whether or not it's going to qualify for 100% funding or not, but there's a lot of flooding that still exists, and we have repetitive loss data from FEMA. I know that you guys experienced the 98 flood up here. I know that there's still significant flooding in Rock Creek. So I don't really know. I don't really want to put any one watershed out there as our priority. And they're not. So everyone is on the level playing field. It's all based on the scoring methodology that we've developed in conjunction with the cities and their staff. So.
question on the scoring methodology. More,
Yeah.
is that something that's accessible to the cities as
Yep.
we apply? Okay.
Yep, so the scoring methodology is brand new. We just adopted it at the last SMAC meeting. All 20 cities voted to adopt the new scoring methodology. It's a little more sophisticated than it's been in the past, but I don't think it's beyond any one city. And we, Madison and others are available to help your staff walk you through it the first time or to help train the engineers to how to apply the methodology to a given project. So, yeah.
You mentioned sinkholes, and we've had issues with sinkholes, not only residentially, but in the commercial parking lots.
Yeah.
The sinkholes are you looking at it based on geology, or are you looking at it based on, have you had enough other issues with sinkholes
Right,
across the county?
So the sinkholes I'm referring to are associated with failed pipe. And when water, the bottom, the invert of the pipe is gone and water starts to migrate around the pipe and then it carries the backfill material with it, the roads collapse or parking lots collapse or sinkholes form. It's not a harsh topography or sinkholes that you see in Missouri or Florida that are geology based, yeah.
And one more question with that. Does the county ever weigh in on what type of pipes we're using for underground?
Right.
I mean,
Yeah.
because, looking at the plastic versus the concrete and the various types you could use, and some are more sustainable than others, how's the county role in that?
So we don't dictate construction materials other than in our own projects that are SMAC funded. So you all have your own adopted design standards and requirements and put your own specifications of what materials can be used in your city. That said, there is an APWA committee, American Public Works Association committee, that we are involved with at the county. We provide funding to help update specifications to meet industry standards or reflect current industry standards. So we're involved at the county level with APWA. Also just our design standards. What level of service should we be designing to? We get involved with those kind of discussions. But I think this watershed-based approach is really going to open the city's eyes to see, well, Overland Park has banned corrugated metal pipe in 1985. They haven't put a piece of it in the ground for the last 25 years. And it might trigger a city to think, you know what, that's probably a good idea. We should require our developers to be doing that as well, type situation. So, yeah.
Oh,
Sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
So what if the city didn't want to participate? What other options do they have here?
Well, the way the Board of County Commissioners has written the way we're moving forward is that if the only mechanism for your city to participate in our program moving forward is through the Watershed Organization. So you can either take it or leave it, I guess.
Okay.
Yeah, I had one more question about the watershed master plans. You've been talking a lot about the county working to develop them, but the agreement says that the watershed organizations are to develop the plan for their watershed, and so I was wondering about the
Right.
balance on that.
We have initiated the planning process and are facilitating it, but the planning teams are working with your cities to glean as much information as possible. So they're going to be developed in concert with your city and with your watershed organization. So in fact, once the watershed organizations meet, I think we're going to have an inaugural or kickoff meeting in mid-February. At that first meeting, after everyone has gotten to know each other and elected their first officers and done their recorded, are formally adopted. The watershed master plan teams are going to be at that first meeting. They're going to present a summary of the data collected today and talk about next steps. And it will be from that point forward, hand-in-hand process of developing the master plans with the watershed organization. So I said they're started. They're not very far along yet. Actually. They're just basically gleaning data and collecting data at this point.
I have one other question.
Yeah.
So I know at one point last year there was, I don't think, a clear direction on projects that had been submitted or were on a list at the time that the new strategic plan was put into place.
Right.
Have you made any decisions about what happens or how those projects may be funded?
So SMAC voted to approve. Great question. So we've applied the new scoring methodology. We have 18 projects on our current list under the current program. We've applied the project scoring methodology to those 18 projects. There was some shuffling amongst the projects, but for the most part, the top one stayed at the top, the bottom one stayed at the bottom. But we did vote at SMAC to reduce all funding funding that's going to be offered for 2021 to 50/50 cost share. Your city can elect to accept funding on that or decline it in hopes that it may become a watershed qualifying project. Reason for that is that during the master planning process, we're going to revisit those identified projects. So they may change in scale or size considerably based on results of the master planning effort.
And so similar to the previous program, as projects are submitted each year and that scoring methodology is applied, there could be a reshuffling of the deck, so to speak, right, in terms of priority. So how do, particularly for us as a smaller city and organization, manage that in terms of how we program in our own budget or 5-year CIP?
Right.
So if we're targeting and then all of a sudden we move out, from
You get bumped out.
right, but if we get bumped down on
Right, so I think that we need to move the county to a 5-year CIP as well, so that new projects get added, but if you're in the CIP, those projects go into a queue and get added to the end of that next 6th year of that CIP. So I don't want to continue to go this year to year where cities are unknown, and we have the county, quite frankly, have an unknown whether you have to match that year. So we'd like to develop a 5-year CIP once these master plans are complete as well. But over the next 5 years, we anticipate or we would like to try to address these problems. We'll score them, and then we can, so that you have some guarantee or some more comfort level of what funding may be available in the next 5 years for these.
All right, any other questions? Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Excellent. All right. Great questions, guys.
Next up, we have acceptance of the December 11th Community Development Committee minutes. How's everyone feel about those?
Accept that.
Fantastic. Great job, Martha. Number 3, we have SMAC agreement for the establishment of Watershed Organization 1 in Johnson County, Kansas. Celia?
So as previously discussed, by signing the agreement, you would be participating or agreeing to participate in Watershed Organization 1. And we've attached the agreement. I'd be happy to answer any questions, and the county personnel is here too, so feel free to
Man, I don't think we have much
questions.
of an option. Get the information on it, we can probably go ahead and do it.
Yeah.
I'll be on the consent, that would.
Consent.
Celia, do you anticipate this requiring any additional staff time, or will it really do you imagine the process will be generally the same as it has historically been?
It's generally the same.
All right.
Just a comment that some of the mayors have changed, so the names that are on this agreement probably need to be updated.
So I would
So
think each city would have changed the agreement, so that should be updated by now.
Okay.
And we revised so that you have the appropriate signature as well now.
Okay, so consent?
Consent.
All right. Great. Thank you, Celia.
Thank you, folks.
Thank you all for coming.
Thank you.
Take care. Next up, we have our marketing, branding, PR services with Laura.
Thank you. So it's my pleasure to be here tonight at the conclusion of an experience that has certainly been a journey over the last several months. It's taken kind of this whole process and the conversations for us to really provide some additional clarity and structure around what we need or want in the area of marketing, branding, and public relations services for the city of Mission. When we started the process, as you know, we were really focused specifically on this as a project for the Parks and Recreation Department. And when we started that process, we knew that we had several objectives, including a better brand for Parks and Recreation, creating opportunities to drive revenues at the community center, having more updated and relevant communication materials, evaluating our current communication and marketing efforts to determine where changes were necessary, really balancing the goals of residents, businesses, and council and staff, and how, what, when we communicate information, better consistency of messages, and a need to sort of decentralize and spread some of this responsibility throughout the organization. So I think we knew that we needed a better brand, if you will, but I think what we've come to appreciate through the process is that in addition to the development of that identity and brand, we need more support in executing and implementing that brand once it's established. So as you are familiar, we've talked about at the December committee meeting that we sent out an RFQ earlier, or in the fall of 2019, and we had 5 responses to that. Those responses were reviewed, and we interviewed 3 firms as a result of that. We had a smaller interview panel that just included the Director of Parks and Recreation, our PRT Commission Chair, and myself, again, because at that point we were really focused on serving the Parks and Recreation department needs, and that was a need that had been accounted for in the 2019 budget, and then we actually had carried that over as a budgetary item and expense into the 2020 budget. So it was something we were planning for at the Parks and Recreation level. It was through that process and really starting to delve into the services that might be available and the conversations that we had around that I think we came to realize that identifying and establishing a brand and identity for Parks and Recreation without a larger conversation around the brand and identity for the city probably was putting the cart before the horse. And so we took a step back. We asked the firms that we had interviewed to sort of reevaluate their proposals. We came back to you in December and looked for some direction to make sure that you were comfortable with us continuing to pursue that conversation on a larger scale and with a larger scope. And so with that direction in December, we actually expanded our interview panel and brought the 2 local firms. The 3rd firm that we had interviewed previously was out of state, and we felt like keeping this opportunity local was important for a variety of reasons. So we expanded the interview panel that included members of the council, staff, and several of the other departments so that we could have that more comprehensive input and look. And Councilmember Davis represented you all on that panel. So after that process and those conversations, and I think they were very thorough and detailed, and we really did a lot of, I think, questioning about what do we need, what do we want, how do we best deliver that. We have brought forward a recommendation that we engage Crux on a 1-year contract. And I would direct, as we kind of talk about this, in your packet, there's a page in the Crux proposal that looks like this. It says services, and Emily, if you could pull that up for me, that would be great. And I think this is, this page from this proposal really sort of highlights some of the things that helped us to realize the benefits that might be available to us in pursuing something that was structured more similarly to how we procure on-call engineering services or outsourced human resources, some of those third-party contractual services that we do, where those individuals in effect become an extension of staff and are available and are much more integrated into the organization. And I think you'll see in this list of services, which is obviously difficult to read there, but I think you'll kind of see just the depth and the breadth of the services that the Crux team brought to the table and could make available to us as a part of this engagement. So I will, so again, I think the way the engagement is structured is that we would have a monthly subscription fee, essentially, I think is how we would kind of look at it. And we have several members of the Crux team here who I'll introduce, and we can certainly ask them to provide some additional detail if the council has interest. But basically that provides us with 60 hours each month of services that are provided and helps get us through not just the development of that brand and identity, but thinking about data collection, staff training and development. Again, if we're going to decentralize, that training and development is really critical to ensuring that we have that consistency of message and continuity of message, standardization of processes and procedures. One of the things that I think really struck us as staff was Crux's approach in providing 30, 60, 90-day action plans where we develop the list of deliverables, and they really drive the process. So they're not dependent on us to wait till we get a break in whatever project or priority we might be working on, but they're really driving that process and helping to keep us on track with that. Those are reviewed and updated on an ongoing basis. I think it's a situation of telling us or helping us understand what we don't know, and more importantly, providing the support and the resources to then make that happen. One of the conversations that we had as an interview panel was, as we move into 2020 with the update to our comprehensive plan and the direction finder survey and some of the other projects that we have on the horizon, that bringing these things together at the outset of that, I think can really help us, or we envision the opportunity to really be able to boost that message and the communication that we have with our residents and constituents over the next 12 months. Also, I think there's some real synergy because the stakeholder groups in both the processes have a lot of overlap, and so there's an opportunity to kind of piggyback and share and have some of those similar conversations. So with that, I will stop and introduce the Crux team and give you all an opportunity to ask some questions, and they can certainly add. I think we have with us this evening Melinda McCrae and Becky Sheaver and Ryan Hembry. I think, right? Okay. And these are all folks that would be working with us as a part of this project. Becky would be our primary point of contact through managing this process, and would certainly invite you if you want to kind of add to my comments, and then if the council has any questions, I'm sure they'd be happy to answer those.
That was an excellent summary, Laura. Thank you. Yes, we're happy to address.
Feel free to come on up.
Okay, great. So yes, I'm Celia McCrae, and I am the founder and CEO of Crux. Launched it June of 2016, so we're 3.5 years old now. Ryan Hembry is our VP of Creative, and Becky Sheaver would be your account director here and senior writer. Any questions?
What happens after the 1 year?
We can retain us forever if you want. We're not going anywhere.
I think you have the opportunity to evaluate. So I think what we as a staff envision is that we will have a structure and some goals and objectives, and then we can bring that to you all to say, how do we keep this moving forward, and what's the best way to sustain the investment that we've made in that process. There's been some conversation, I know, over the last year about additional staff in the organization to take on those responsibilities. I think some of our concerns initially have been that in order to get us to where we need to be, finding one person with a skill set to be able to accomplish all of those things could be really challenging. But I think certainly working through this process gives us the opportunity then to evaluate how we want to carry this forward.
Yeah.
I noticed one of the elements not included is web development. How do you work with our current website and factor in your recommendations?
So we design, excuse me, fighting a cold. We design the website, write all the content, place all the imagery, and then we work with a web developer. So we will manage that process for you. We will go out and get bids. We have a host of freelancers that are tried and tested that we work with and we trust, that we would allow to bid on the process, or anyone that you've used in the past, we could bring into that as well.
You have Kara Brooks.
Yes.
Is your
Kara Brooks is our social media expert, yes. Yeah, so she was at the interview as well. And so she would be part of the team, and the fifth member of the team, you get a 5-person team, would be the person tracking all the projects, keeping all the balls in the air, providing all of the analytics. That's the data piece.
What kind of data? What are some examples of some of the data that you're looking to track? Maybe it's more of a question for Laura.
Google Analytics, social media analytics, email marketing analytics. We tie it together. We've actually partnered with an SEO expert. We're building dashboards for clients so that you can start to see what's happening in real time when we push something out on social media. How does that impact your website? We push out an email, what happens? The only thing it doesn't track is PR. But we know when you get a hit, and we can watch that spike happen on your Google Analytics.
And what would the city be looking to get out of that?
Out of the analytics?
Yeah.
Well, I think one of the things that we did talk with the firms that we interviewed was what's the return on investment of this project for us, knowing that's a question we have and the council has. And I think both firms that we interviewed were very candid and very truthful with us and said, we aren't going to sit here today and tell you there's a really direct way to calculate the return on investment for a project like this. And so part of that, if I'm remembering what I heard, both in the Crux presentation and others, was we established that benchmark and we established some goals about what we would like this to accomplish, and then there are ways for us to measure and track whether we're seeing those results.
I mean, we're not a growing corporation trying to boost our sales, though, so I kind of struggle with a little bit of because not an insignificant amount of money here we're talking about, and this is a one-year thing, right? Which will lead to ongoing expense after that 1 year. We're going to take that on one way or another. Not saying you're going to do anything.
So just speaking from my perspective of the return on investment in terms of the investment of time we have in events and things, expanding our reach to make that more valuable. So if we're going to host a festival or have a market or whatever, you want to be growing that, and we haven't been very assertive or aggressive on trying to build the reach. So when we shout a message out, how many people could potentially take advantage of the community services we're already doing. So I feel like the return on investment is not as much on the marketing side or the profit side, but the value of the things that we're offering, or like if we have a public service message and we really want to get it out, it will reduce the number of phone calls we get at the front desk because we've reached more people more effectively with whatever messaging we're trying to convey.
One of the things that I was impressed about is the fact that we have a number of things that are coming up. Like for instance, the sales tax renewal that we're thinking about needing to craft a message and to identify how are we going to promote this and try to get buy-in for the renewal of our sales tax. So these are kinds of activities that I think that Crux has the capacity to help us with. I also do think that the fact that we're doing this comprehensive plan and we're going through stakeholder interviews, those interviews are going to be very rich to be have a marketing firm understand what the nature of the community and what their needs are and how they can characterize what the city is trying to do in a better way. And so to me that's dovetailing those projects jointly and helping us in terms of preparing to state to the community what it is we're trying to accomplish.
I have some questions that I think are more specific towards Laura, so I want to target some questions that are more specific for you guys. How broad do you consider this rebranding? Because there's a lot of arms of mission that are very old and some that are very new. So I'm curious about how broad you think that is, and then also what the general process is for that. Who are the real decision makers? Is this more staff driven? Is it a mixed? Is it a committee that's kind of driving the energies behind what you all are doing?
So I think a lot of that will be determined during our kickoff meeting because we need to understand who are the stakeholders and who needs to have the voice in this. How broad is that? I was relating to Ken and others during the interview that I was the CMO for the KC Chamber for many years, and I spearheaded their rebrand. And you're rebranding an organization at that time that was 125 years old, many stakeholders, many constituents that we had to reach out and speak to and get their buy-in, including the media at the time. So I'm very familiar with a process that can be this extensive, but that's going to be part of the discovery when we kick off the project. And Ryan, I don't know if you want to speak to the branding process.
Well, yeah, no, so I think, Stan, so, really we want to create kind of an overarching brand that everybody can relate to. Kind of going back to some of your questions about how do we measure this, it's about civic engagement, right? So we want everybody to be kind of co-creators in what this new brand is, what the messaging is. We want to make sure we interview those key stakeholders find out what messages are going to resonate with them, how do we communicate that to them, and then we utilize the tools at our disposal, the metrics, the analytics, to figure out are those messages resonating. If not, because we have that 30, 60, 90-day plan that Laura was discussing, we can identify where there's some areas where maybe there's a disconnect, we need to pivot our strategy. So we're not saying, okay, here's everything you're going to do. You know, the original proposal, it had, I think, 25 items on there. We want to go in there, figure out what is this brand, what does it mean to business leaders, to residents, you know, people who work here, and then develop that brand and that messaging around them, tailor it to their needs. I don't know if I answered your question, but...
Did he answer your question?
Yeah, that's helpful. That's helpful. Thank you. Yeah.
One of the objectives was the opportunities to drive revenues at the community center, and this is possibly a Laura question as well. Are we looking at a self-sufficiency of a certain percentage?
No.
Okay.
I mean, I think that is, you know, we've set self-sufficiency goals outside of this process in the past, and I think that's something that we continue to evaluate in terms of what are those, what are the council goals and objectives, and I think you'll see us bring that forward. But I think as we set those goals as a council, then we can use some of these tools to help understand how we might drive, or you know, where those opportunities, what groups we might need to be targeting to look at some additional revenue generation opportunities. But this process will not set those costs or drive those cost recovery.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Do we have any other questions for Crux?
Not really. I think the proposal is good, and I have no doubt that your company has the skill set to be able to take on a lot of this stuff. I just personally feel like the scope of what this whole thing is too big for us right now, especially with the dollars attached to it. It's hard to justify. If you went around and asked some of the neighbors, are you okay with kicking in $10 for this thing every year, probably going forward, right? I don't know if they would be. So.
I share some of Nick's thoughts, and I want to preface that comment with saying I've been bugging Laura about improved communications. And I got guys and I was like, what are you talking about? But it feels almost as though we discovered the need in the RFQ process. So as I'm curious if, you know, because we began with this Parks and Rec vision of market, and yes, stepping back totally made sense, but it sounds like a lot of the discovery of what we were needing happened as we heard from Crux, which speaks to you all fantastically. And all of this is so impressive. I think it's just a, you know, what's next year look like? Does it make more sense to have someone in-house that is a, you know, does that make more sense? I don't know. But I do like this cafeteria style of being able to, you know, try different things out. So maybe for a year it makes sense. Anyways, I'm just talking out loud at this point, but those are my general thoughts.
And I don't know that it's, I think that what probably came to light for us was, I don't know that the need was identified through the process. I think the opportunity to procure the services was something that became clear to us, that we didn't know that whether or not that level of service existed for us out there. Because I will tell you that, you know, as I mentioned, for 2 years, there was $30,000 each year in the 2019 and the 2020 budget for Parks and Recreation for marketing and PR services. And sorry, I think we're all sharing the same thing around the building. My thought just flew out of my head, so it'll come back eventually.
Well, can I do one thing?
Yeah.
Too? And I mean, I certainly echo that in terms of I didn't know what Crux offered existed, and I think your model is unique. But to me, it was I didn't know that we could go and get this. So my options were, you know, you can redesign a logo, or you can go through your website, or you can hire a marketing staff person, or any of those things. But this model, to me, feels like it will be customized to us in that way, where we can collaborate and get truly educated throughout our organization. And I think what we will learn by a year's time with Crux is kind of the discipline of the messaging. Why does consistent messaging work? And kind of that streamlining of how we communicate and when, and pulling down all the old logos and getting that sort of discipline built into our DNA a bit, that I think is something that maybe we don't need every year. So I am thinking about all of the competing priorities, and that's what we've been living with as a status quo for so many years, where we all kind of know it's a little bit below standard and we're not quite happy with it, but no one has the time to kind of dive in. But this is so structural to me and comprehensive that it kind of gets us lined up, and then we can decide if we still need a fancy level of service, but we'll be thinking about it all differently and we'll be all on the same page. So I just think it's...
And the training and implementation too.
Right.
What is
that you can pass through their department, so we're all kind of using the same rules. And then the analytics, once those are set up, we'll all have that skill set, and the pages will be reporting back to us, and we'll be able to be informed about it. And then we just won't be shooting in the dark like we kind of have been.
So I just want to make sure I'm understanding correctly that what you're saying is unique about Crux's service, but that you didn't know was available and that makes it valuable is really this implementation follow-through piece. Is that right?
Yes. That and I think the breadth of expertise that you get, that it makes it more versatile. It's kind of like when you have a law firm that has different people that can come in for different purposes and give you advice on a specific kind of issue.
Yeah.
And to me, that's the same thing. You actually have a group of experts to help you in the process of developing messaging for whatever purpose you're trying to accomplish, whether it's a magazine and all sorts of things that we do, and your communication to neighborhoods, the ability to communicate more directly to the regions of the city of Mission.
That's where I'm struck when you mentioned the purpose. Maybe that's just not clear to me what the purpose and vision of this whole thing is. But I feel like there's been a lot of scope because we've started talking about rebranding efforts. And again, I don't know if we're going after a new BMW, we might be able to get by with a 2-year-old Toyota Camry. That's what concerns me here. I don't really, fully understand what we're trying to get out of it. And that's not a knock on you guys. The presentation's great. I'm sure you guys do great work. I'm sure you have the skill sets to pull this stuff off. But we are not trying to go out there and get market penetration and sell our new product, right? And I know we need to get better about some of our branding messaging.
Yeah, I would push back on that just a little bit. I know we've had, ongoing discussions about, what does our business make up? Are we attracting a wide variety of businesses that are going to support people wanting to continue to stay and move into Mission? And so I think you could get some of that insight from
what's our goal?
The data analytics.
What are the top 5 things we're looking to get out of this?
Well, I would say, long-term attracting better businesses, or not better businesses, but a wider variety of businesses. But I think knowing what the metrics say in the first place would be helpful.
I think if you asked all of us, we would have different ideas on what that looks like.
Yeah.
And I guess maybe what I'm getting at is we need to push back on this a little bit and get together and really come together on what we're all looking to get out of it, or maybe not, right? Maybe we just trust that the committee that you guys put together has done enough of that. But I don't feel like those goals have been presented very well. Maybe I just didn't read it clearly enough. I don't know. I wasn't part of the committee, so I don't know what some of those conversations look like either. But it seems like a lot of money to put after this effort without really seeing what we're going to hopefully get out of it.
Kind of like the lobbying contract, right?
A lot like the lobbying contract.
I would just ask too, I kind of echo some of what Nick says. Who's the driver? Us or the firm? Who is actually coming up with what our needs are or what we could do better at? Who is actually the driver?
We're driving that, but we're listening. We're having conversations with the key stakeholders that we need to be speaking with and need to be heard. I think that one of the key differentiators too of the Crux model that does make it unique is we're building that strategy first. We're just not coming in and doing a rebrand and putting a new logo and slapping a new message on it. We're doing extensive research ahead of time. We're looking at the full family of brands for the whole city to make sure that it looks like a family. We're looking at the overarching message for the whole city, and then we'll take each one of those departments separately and message those as well. We're going to put together a communications strategy along with the content piece of it, your social media strategy, a PR strategy. So I am essentially the chief marketing officer for this account, building that plan and that roadmap. And then this team of 2 + 2 back at the office will be executing that for you. And so we will have monthly check-ins, if not more than that, more frequently with the core team. And I think we have discussed putting together a committee that would be that marketing branding committee, if you will.
What are you selling? I guess that's I kind of come back to that. To me, we're the what. We define what. You're the how. You get that message across, but I don't know what we're selling.
It's your overarching message for the city of Mission. Why do
well, there's
businesses?
Not one message. There's multiple messages, and I guess the branding component would kind of adhere to the different. It's like a wheel with different spokes. One is housing, one is business, one is. I mean,
and we're going to look at all of the messaging as well to make sure that it is all cohesive. But I think what you're selling is economic development here in the city of Mission, right? You want to attract businesses, you want to attract residents, you want to attract a workforce.
Can I just get an example from you? Okay, this may be off key, and I apologize up front, but this is something I've been wondering. I've been on this council for 20 years now. If we wanted certain businesses along Johnson Drive,
right?
What recommendation? I don't need recommendations right now. I mean, how do we go about getting certain businesses without being discriminatory toward another car parts store or something of that nature? How do you get?
Tax incentives.
Right.
Development codes. Yeah, I don't think it's through the use of these strategies or your brand.
But you want to
So
attract.
economic development was the key that she mentioned. So
to attract businesses to want to come here, because they're resonating with the message of what the City of Mission stands for. And then we're pushing that out in a communication strategy that's engaging people to react.
Sounds like we have some different thoughts here on the committee. Personally, I would like to maybe get a little bit more information from staff, maybe if we're going to vote on this, in a week, or if we decide to push back, maybe I'm not having more conversations, I'm not sure. But from staff, I would like to hear maybe potential plans for what comes after CRUPS, right? So, and potentially what costs could come after CRUPS, because I think that's the next question is what are those ongoing investments, because they, there could be a varieties, and I feel like that might answer some of our questions and be able to, that's what I'd like to see from staff personally.
What are some of the more concrete objectives that we have that we're trying to accomplish over this first year? Getting 60 hours a month of services, that's great, but are we working towards whatever it is that we went into this agreement with in the first place and making sure we're moving towards that, and we can go and have a conversation with our neighbors about why we decided to spend this money and what we're going to get out of it. That's ultimately what some of the challenges for me. I don't necessarily see that.
And I think if when the original RFQ went out, I think if there was an awareness on staff that a total rebrand and overhaul of the city was which I don't even think that you all knew at that time was really kind of on the horizon. I think that we all would have had a little bit more background and preparation and thought to maybe even at our retreat of what that rebranding could look. I don't know. Anyways.
I just want you to know, this has nothing to do with, I would say if anybody was standing up.
Absolutely, understood, yes.
There is a section in your packet that does specifically discuss some of the objectives that when they did the panel that were looked at, if you guys are looking for specific objectives.
I'll offer that. I guess it's just not that clear. And maybe it's because I wasn't involved in some of that conversation.
Yeah, sure.
I'll just offer a few things. I'm kind of thinking about, the beginning of the decade seems like a natural break to begin to form kind of like you're kind of naturally forward thinking with that turn. We have new leadership here. We have the buy-in, it seems, from, stakeholders, and we're about to have additional population increase too with Gateway and the mixed-use development by installation already. We have a high number of renters in the city. By 2050, half of all Kansans will be living in Johnson County. I think that we really could have a chance to do this the right way in conjunction with kind of our comprehensive plan that we talked about. And I think that, kind of to Nick's point, I think it is sometimes ambiguous thinking about what a return on investment would be with an act like this, but if you are going to do it, I would be an advocate that we're doing it the right way, and I am comforted knowing that we kind of have this perfect storm of all the pieces in place to be able to really give this a very concentrated and worthwhile effort. And I think that if we were to see any benefits from a project like this, it does seem like the infrastructure is in place to be able to kind of realize those gains. So I'm kind of leaning towards supporting this at the time. I mean, I also would like to learn more from kind of the additional information we get, but it does seem like, for something like this, it is set up to be done the right way if we were to do it. And we'd be able to help control that narrative and really control that messaging as we're about to really have a significant milestone in the city's history that we haven't really seen in a long time with all these new development projects coming in. So we're about to be on the map even more, and I think this is a good way to help us get in front of that and start kind of controlling that.
So I'm looking to the committee for where you would like to go with this.
I'm really in support of it.
Yeah, I would say take it to council non-consent, but maybe if we could have a little bit of an additional update from staff at council and once you brought up.
Other thoughts?
What other options are there? I mean, this is really the only one that we can present with this much detail, at least for any kind of proposal. I know we've talked to a couple of firms. I think, to me, it's less about the firm and their skill set. I have no doubts about that here. It's more about just, the scope of what we're trying to do. Are we good with justifying a $100,000 a year expense going forward? Because that's at least probably what this is going to be to undertake this effort.
Well, I would really contend that this first year, that's what you're looking at. But I would also frame that a little bit to say that in some respects, we had committed 60 of the $90,000 through two budgetary processes to dedicate to something like this.
For this year?
Well, for 2019, last 2 years,
right?
And so we've, in some respects, identified and planned for and communicated publicly that this is an investment that we were willing to make. And I think that we have an opportunity in this first year by adding $30,000 to that to expand a scope beyond what we had anticipated in the 2019 and 20 budgets for Parks and Recreation.
Right.
So I don't think we're starting from 0 to 90. I think it's
No, I understand that,
right,
but
60
it
to
is
90.
probably going to be going from $0 ongoing this year to $100,000 plus a year.
Can I speak to that?
Yes.
So it is more expensive year one because of the branding piece of it, coinciding with building that marketing machine and that foundation of the content. If you continued on with Crux, our fee would be reduced after year one.
So
Plus,
the $60, 60 hours a month at $125 an hour is not a discounted rate then, like it says? Because that seems like it's
it is a discounted rate from $150 an hour, yes.
Right.
Yes, for the branding piece of the branding component married with the marketing
That would
component.
be even cheaper after year one then?
So yes, our fee after year one would be $100 an hour to keep the marketing, the content, the social media, the PR, the regular communication strategy moving forward. Our fee would be reduced to $100 an hour, so it would be
About 75 grand a year.
yes, about $72,000 a year then. However, we did talk to Emily about you may not need the 60 hours after year one, and so we're willing to work with you on that at the $100 an hour. So if it's 30 hours of overtime that you need per month after year one is a lot of heavy lifting, right? There's probably a lot more hours than the 60 hours per month that actually go into it, if I'm being very honest, for year one.
I don't disagree with any of that. I don't doubt any of that.
Yeah.
Again,
So I just don't want you to think it's $100,000 a year if you're continuing with
It's a lot
Crux.
less about you guys and a lot more about
Yeah.
should we be taking on this scope
Yeah.
of a thing right now.
And if you did want to hire internally after year one, I mean, we're there as a backup as needed. We're there to help train that individual if needed. Or you can reduce the hours too. So once you're a client, and we'll work with you.
Ken has a comment.
Yeah, I wanted to emphasize the fact that you talked about scalability.
Yeah.
And that there is scalability depending on what to better fit the need.
Yeah.
As you define, you help us define
Yeah.
what our message is.
And this is really two projects in one, year one. It is the branding component, and it's the communications component. Okay? Once the branding's done, it's done. Yeah.
So I would support and ask us to take it to council.
Mr. Mayor, I know you typically don't participate in committees, but given that we all have some different perspectives and questions, I'd like to hear your 2 cents.
Hearing what's been said, I think we need to slow down a little bit. I know we've already slowed down once, learning some things we didn't know. And I think what's obvious to me is, I'm not sure the objectives have been clearly communicated to everybody that they feel comfortable. So this is marketing, branding. It's not like investing in a road. So it's a different type of investment. And the question is this an investment we're ready to make right now? And with competing priorities. So I'm hearing a lot of pushback. So the question I would have is, if we went a little slower, not take it to council for a vote next council, but give staff a chance with the consultant to answer some of the questions that have been raised tonight, and then bring it up. I mean, there's no rush, right? I mean, we're not under a time frame. This has to get pushed through. If we're not ready right now, then let's have that discussion. Let's have that additional information that you're looking for to give you a level of comfort. And you may not get there after that, but at least I think we will have stopped and said, okay, what is it that would give you that comfort level if this is the right thing to do?
Thank you. Given that, I would like to see potentially pushing back till February maybe, to revisit at that committee meeting with more information from Laura. Is that something that the committee would feel comfortable with, and then potentially taking action in February? Yeah.
I'm fine with that, I just won't be there next February.
But will you be there for
For
council?
the council.
Okay.
Will you be here for the retreat?
Yes.
Okay, so I think that February timeframe may make some sense, because we can come back to present some information at the committee meeting. It will give you the which is the 5th of February. It will give you the opportunity at our retreat on the 8th to then maybe integrate that with our other conversations around other projects and priorities, and then consider that.
Thank you, and thank you to staff for your work on this. I think that we all have the same generally objectives. I think it's a matter of just making sure we're all getting there
Absolutely.
the way that we all want to see us get there. And thank you to Preps for coming. Really incredible work that you guys do.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Okay, I think that finishes our action items. Laura, do you have any department updates?
I know that both Celia and Brian have a couple of updates that they can share with you, so I don't know which one of you wants to go first. Brian?
Okay, I know some of you have been kind of some questions about projects that kind of lingering out there, so I too have had some questions. So I'm kind of following up a little bit. I talked with Penny Harden, the owner of Tidalway, right before the holidays, about the status of their project at Johnson Drive. And they've got one contractor that's building all of the projects in the Kansas City metropolitan area. He's kind of going from site to site to site. So right now he's in Blue Springs finishing out that location. And once they're done, they'll come to Mission and start on our location. So the expected date is mid-February. So there'll be a lot of kind of site work done at first, because they're going to have to redo that retaining wall that's in the back of the property. So there's some time working on that, but then you'll actually see structure going up sometime early spring.
Even if they could just keep their sign upright.
Yeah.
It's been windy. Has been windy.
Has been windy. I'll see if they can put sandbags down there.
Exactly.
I mean, I think we were promised, by them that they would make improvements to that site rapidly after the project improvement approval, and I would say that that has not been done. So to the extent that we can stay on top of it.
They've been doing some water line work. That was one of the things that had to be done first, was to connect the water line. So they did do that work late summer, right after the project was approved by you all. I think things have gone a little slower than anticipated with construction of their other sites, so that's probably the reason why. They haven't put grass seed down or anything like that on the site. Maybe mowing it, maybe weeds, maybe a whole other story there. So it's slow, but it's moving along.
They're gonna get another car wash at Metcalf and Johnson.
Yeah, yeah.
Shawnee Mission.
Yeah, they are getting competition in the area quickly. Speaking of competition, the owner of Rock Creek Brewery, one of the owners was in here the other day, and told him I'm awfully thirsty. He said he's working on it. They did pull a building permit late summer. They just been kind of slowly working on the renovation of that building. Kind of getting some of the pieces lined up.
What's that
It's
location?
the old Run Right, Automotive in Beverly, just north of Johnson Drive. So that building needed a lot of extensive work to it. So they're hoping to do a soft opening in March. So go for that. And then of course we've all seen the Synergy building going up. A lot of activity on that site. The designers are also working on final designs for the garage, the parking structure. I think all the footings are now in. So they're planning to, they submitted some specification work that our engineer wanted today, and ship that off to the engineer. So I'm thinking that should all be wrapped up by mid-February at the latest, and the actual structure should start going up by the end of February. So.
And I will interject there. I know we're getting a lot of questions about the look of that facility, or we are. We talked at staff meeting yesterday about getting a post out there, some additional information with, if you recall, the visual that Brian had with the whole site rendering that kind of shows all of the buildings in context. So we'll provide some information. That is not what that Synergy building is going to look like when it's finished. So we'll provide some context around that and maybe help alleviate some of the fears that it is just a big box going on. And if you, I was telling the mayor that I noticed today when I was in the community center, and it won't be the same treatment, but if you look at some of what's happening at the parking structure, ocean trails, there's some stone veneer that's going along the side and starting to change some of that. So we'll get that message out and start to help.
Can the developer
Address.
help provide some of that stuff to start getting out to people too? I mean,
Yeah, I think
it
absolutely.
shouldn't all just be on the city. I know
Right.
maybe we have to be the mechanism to publish some of it. But
Yeah, no, we have it from them, so we can certainly share that.
The WCA transition, I think, is going very smoothly. The one thing that's kind of hanging out there is, I guess, condominium associations up north, like Lincolnshire. There's actually a bin and a corral where folks dispose of their trash. So that's always been kind of a contention of who's responsible for that. Is that a commercial contract or is that part of the residential service contract? And with this transition, we kind of put our foot down and said, no, that's part of the residential service contract. Those folks are paying for residential services on their property taxes, and that's what they should be getting, whether you throw it into a bin or you throw it into a can. And so we kind of told Waste Management, get them out of there, and WCA is going to put carts of bins into those locations. So that should be transpiring this week.
So they'll be having regular physical bins. Just like
They'll
everybody
still
else.
have the big, giant yard, the trash bins that go into the corral, but it's just the billing mechanism. So they'll be owned by WCA, they'll be serviced by WCA, and there won't be any additional cost on top of what the property owners are already paying through the property taxes. And the Waste Management has also been, they've collected all the trash carts in town. They took them down to the Mission Bowl site, and there they've kind of sat.
Yes, they have.
And it's just been a slow process for them. I was surprised to find that a lot of those bins still had trash in them. I'm not really sure what happened there.
Was that the plan, that that's where their staging area was going to be?
Yeah. So they were supposed to obviously work a lot quicker than they've been working. So we've been kind of on them, hey, let's get this done, let's get it going.
I saw some of the trailers.
Yeah.
Well, they had a trash truck out on site yesterday, so
Yeah.
I think they got the trash out of all the bins.
They're dumping the bins, they got to take the wheels off the bins, then they got to stack them, they got to put them into a truck, haul them back to their warehouse to store them. I think they only have one truck, so it's just, truck goes, the guy's kind of standing there, wait till the truck comes back. It's just, not a very well-managed process.
When is WCA, when are they getting their new trash trucks? Because they're, the ones they're currently using, I mean, they don't have the automatic arms or,
Some of them are town and country trucks.
yeah,
Yeah.
the one that came by our place.
Okay.
It's a mix. They've rented a couple trucks. They're probably using some trucks for their existing fleet. They have ordered the trucks for us, our service. But any kind of equipment like that, there's just a long lead
Sure.
time.
Evanville, I think, might have some trucks available.
So that's really about it. We posted the planner position last week. First review of those applications will be the end of this month. Hoping to have somebody here by the end of February. Laura and I have a meeting with Confluence next week to kind of kick off the comp plan update. It'll be an opportunity to meet with them and talk about scheduling and approach to the project, in particular creating the advisory committee, some thoughts they might have about that process. So,
Brian, do you have any update on bowling alley now that
yeah, I'm not really sure how much is for public consumption, but so there's the owner of the building and there's the owner of the land that the building sits on. The owner of the land has gained control of the building. And so I think he's negotiated with the company that had the litigation. He's gone in there and kind of cleaned up the look of the building and kind of secure it better and make it a little bit more attractive. He's got some long-term plans for that site.
Okay.
So I expect we'll probably be seeing those within the next 60 days or so.
So is the city going to incur any demo costs, or is that?
Not if he's moving forward with something, yeah.
Huh?
Not if he's moving forward with plans to do something.
Okay,
And that was ultimately the goal, was just to get something going.
okay.
So,
Well, if he wasn't, then the city was going to do the demolition.
right.
And then put it on.
Assess it.
Assess it.
Assess it against him.
So,
Right.
yes.
It has been secured, it does look a lot better.
It does look a lot better, you're right. Thank you.
I had an issue this week, and I'm gonna define it as my issue, but it's not parochial in nature, it could happen across the city. Spectrum was in doing some line work, and I think, Celia, you may have gotten a call. I came in and talked to Jim about it. The resident called, it was a Bear Construction, which is a sub to Spectrum. They came in, they didn't tell the people they were coming or anything, and I don't know what their requirement is as a sub, but they made complete ruts in their backyard. No one knew they were coming or why or anything. So when they called me, I said, make sure you get the name of the company and get a phone number or contact or something so you can follow up with them. Well, her husband went out and we talked to him, and they said, well, they'd come out and put some grass seed in the spring, and Jim said, that's not gonna work on the ruts. Anyway, it could happen across the city, and if we're doing stuff like that, I think there needs to be some level of communication in terms of what our role is, what the sub has to do with Spectrum and that. So I don't know if Jim said something to you, but.
If there's any damage to the property, they should be restoring it. So,
Well, I think
that's
we're gonna
ultimately-
tell, if she hadn't gone out and seen the ruts, they were on their way out.
Yeah.
So typically for utilities, if they have an easement, they don't always give notice to property owners because they have the right to be in there. Now, some utilities are better than others, so it would be nice to put a door hanger or some communication. So we have a contact, we're going to call them and follow up with them, and then we'll let the property owner know. It is typical for utilities, they can't really restore the ground now, so they'll come back in the spring. So we'll try to follow up with them, but they're notorious for doing just what you said, throwing out grass seeds. So we'll do everything we can as a city to, work with them, but, it is sometimes, our leverage is our franchise agreement, which is in place, and it's difficult to do, and so we'll do everything we can, but that is
Do you get pictures of the yard?
I went by and saw it today, so I don't know why they drove back there. I don't know if they could have walked back there. So like I said, this is the subs of the utilities. Some are better than others, but this is typical for utilities to do that. But we'll do everything we can.
Well, I want to be atypical and not put up with it.
Yeah. But we only have so much leverage. But like I said, we'll press and do everything we can to help out the homeowner to get that done.
That's it for me.
Okay.
I was going to
say that.
Seriously.
Yeah.
That's kind of the
That's how we
catalyst.
met. That's right.
Probably.
That's how we met, Nick.
Oh. Yeah.
Cable
I went
contractor.
over screaming at RC about it. Palm me off to you guys.
We did have that in Olathe where Google came in and it was a last minute and everybody was excited and they just ran around everywhere and disturbed everyone's, and then they didn't replace it and it was just an ongoing thing. They finally got it done, but it just takes a lot of work from the city and the homeowners to, try to get that resolved,
So at this point in time, do I convey to the homeowner that the city's aware of it, or is it incumbent on the homeowner to work with the sub?
As soon as we get in contact with our contact, if you want, you can either give me the homeowner's information or I can send it to you and tell them what they said. We'll try to follow up with them. I'll give the homeowner the contact as well, and we can work together to try to get this taken care of.
Thanks.
So a update on some of the projects for Broadmoor. I know every time I come back there's a new update, but we're really close this time. As you recall, the traffic signal poles have been the delay. Well, we had a little bit of utility delay at the beginning for about a month, but traffic signal poles, it takes 20 weeks to order them. There's only one supplier. Need to get into that business. There used to be two, but went out of business. So they ordered the traffic signal pole more than 20 weeks ago. All of them came in except the one on the northwest corner. Supposedly it was a manufacturer defect. And so they're redoing it. It's supposedly on a truck. And as soon as it comes in, we're going to install it based on the weather. Well, meanwhile, a mast arm, they put in the wrong bolt pattern at the manufacturer too. And so that mast arm, it's going to go on the east side of Johnson Drive, north-south. We sent a letter to the contractor, telling them we're going to charge liquidated damages. It's really kind of out of their control, but they put pressure on the manufacturer. They sped up the process. It should come on the 24th. I'm going to get another update this week. So if all goes well, we'll go ahead and install the pole. Then we'll put in the mast arm, and then we have to remove. We can't remove the old pole, the old signal system until we get everything else up. And so that's the delay on the sidewalk and why there's construction cones still there, because there's some boxes and things that are the old ones that we can't remove until we get the signal out of the way. So hopefully in February we'll have all that taken care of, and then we can open up that southbound right turn lane. Then we'll come back in the spring and do the pavement, and then we'll be done. And so I've been asking Brent, I said, as soon as you can get those cones out of the way, let's do it, but right now they're leaving them there because of the poles. So that's the update, so we're getting closer. As far as 50th and Dearborn, there's a theme here on the utilities. The fiber wasn't located on the plans. They're working on that this week, and hopefully they'll be done this week. They also didn't show gas on the plans, and so next week gas should be out and within the next 2 weeks. Then they'll begin construction again, and it should be complete about April. Just a little note about utilities. So typically what happens on a project, you do utility locates, during the design process. They show them on the plans, then the designer sends the plans to the utility company, and they go out and they say, no, it's not there, or it's this deep, and we need to relocate it. Well, in these older parts of town, but even in newer parts of town, the utilities, they just didn't mark them correctly. They didn't have the information. So in the future, I've encountered this, and we're not alone here, unfortunately, but there's things we can do up front to try to stop these or limit these utility locates. It may be paying more money up front to do potholes to see where all the utilities are. So we're talking about that internally on certain projects, especially a project like Johnson Drive. So anyway, that's where that project is.
Is that what Water 1's doing on Woodson?
No, that was a water main break. As far as Lamar, I'm supposed to get final plans this week or next week. We're planning, these are just real approximate dates, bid in February, and depending on the contractor, probably start around May or so. The unique thing about this project is because we have a Safe Routes to School grant, the pavement markings and the bike lanes are managed by KDOT. So they're bidding and letting the plans, and they have all these requirements. So we've separated the plans. So the first set of plans, because if we don't, it's gonna cost a lot more with KDOT being involved in every aspect, and they have some more stringent requirements and standards and things like that. So the first part of it will be us bidding the whole project, and we'll put down temporary pavement markings, and then we'll immediately come in and have the contractor that's bid just to do the bike lane. So it should be pretty fast, and hopefully it's just a timing thing of trying to get it all, simultaneously. So we're, planning to start spring, May or so. As far as Rock Creek, we're hoping to bid the project in January. We have all the easements, but one resident who is a new resident, we've been having trouble getting a hold of him, but we're going to be meeting with him next week. I don't anticipate any issues. There's one business that is a holdout, so we're working with Pete Heaven on that issue. Meanwhile, we're hoping to bid it in January and start construction. Hopefully we'll have that resolved by then, depending on the contractor's time, March or April, with a construction end date at the end of the year.
I have a question related to that. When are you going to come back with more information about the bid alternates that we had discussed? Will it be around then or before then?
So I talked to Laura, the city administrator, about that, and what we were planning to do is to come back once we get the bids and have those items like the ramp and the wall as bid alternates, and then I can present what we talked about, the rate of return on investment, and then we can make the decision. You can make the decision on whether you want to add those alternates in.
With real dollars in front of you, so that we aren't trying to guess, what those costs are.
And then can it be said if the holdout is one of the potential beneficiaries of those bid alternates or not? Or will that be public information at the time we're discussing that in terms of, okay.
Yeah, I mean, it may be a situation where we need to, I don't think we can redesign the project, so we may need to come back. We're still trying to make some progress, but we may need to proceed to condemn the easement that, easements that we need. And if so, then obviously that would be something that comes back to you all.
And that's all I had.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other department updates?
I don't think so.
Okay, that concludes our committee meeting.
All right, is everyone ready to go on the next one? Yep. So it's 8:08. We'll begin our Finance and Administration Committee meeting. First off, we don't have any public hearings. Do we have any public comments? This would be comments from members of the public for items that are not on our agenda tonight. All right, seeing none, we don't have any public presentations, so we'll jump straight into our action items. First up, we have acceptance of the December 11th, 2019 Finance and Administration Committee minutes. Martha.
Yes, those were in your packet.
Except,
Anything else on those? We have a resolution for the destruction of certain records. Also Martha.
Each year, you all adopt a resolution in January that we update annually and identifies those records that are laid out in state statute as having specific timelines for being destroyed. That gives us a guideline for being able to go up in the attic and clean out a little bit. I will say that we are cautious in what we purge, and anything of historical value, and of course any minutes, resolutions, ordinance, all of those things are kept permanently.
Any questions for Martha on the records?
I just have a quick on records retention for emails. How long do we need to keep our emails relative to conveyance of minutes and packets? I don't know, but we can find out.
Well, you don't need to keep any of those emails relative to that because we have we have a printed copy of that or things that are archived in terms of those, but I think essentially your 1 year is kind of.
Okay.
Take it council consent. Oh,
yes,
sorry.
consent, that's fine, consent is fine. I was just saying that Martha took me on a tour of the attic.
Oh.
Somebody, if you haven't had a chance to do it, I would encourage you to take a look at it.
Okay, I'll put that on my list.
No. It's really not that exciting.
All right, next up we have our Gateway Special Obligation Bond ordinance revisions, Laura.
Yeah, so back in November, the council adopted ordinance 1509, which authorized the issuance of a special obligation tax increment financing bonds for the Gateway project. We did several things and took several actions last fall to get us positioned, changes to the redevelopment agreement to line up with the current construction schedule for the project, and positioning ourselves to go to market with the bond ordinance revisions. We knew we had established a really aggressive time frame for ourselves to try to hit the mark and get into the market before the end of the year. And we had set a pretty hard deadline of about the second week of December, that if the developer didn't have their loan documents escrowed, which means that, so getting their loan documents into escrow means no changes, right? So that means everybody's on board and nothing's going to change from that point forward. That was one of the conditions that was precedent to us actually taking the bond issue to the market. So they didn't get that accomplished, and because they were dealing with review committees and loan committees with two different entities. So we said, look, we're going to have one shot at the market, and we want this issuance to be as successful. It's to our advantage and to their advantage to do that. So we said the market's basically closed down in late December for the holidays and around the first of the year. So we're just going to pull the plug on this, and we're going to wait, and we're going to circle back and come back after the first of the year. So we did that, and as a result, we need to make some really just housekeeping changes to this ordinance. So we, as we affectionately refer to it, had the band back together this Tuesday. We have a standing conference call with about 16 people on it every week. Underwriters, bond counsel, land use attorney, financial advisor, developers team, everyone. So we kind of kicked that process back up this week. Things are back on track, and we'll get this issue into the market as soon as is feasible. What that will require is the preliminary limited offering memorandum, or the PLOM that we talked about last fall. We didn't actually provide you with the draft of that yet, but that's the document that essentially goes to the market that talks about the project. So we'll have to do a little bit of work around just updating, because in fact there are things that are out of the ground now on the site, and the status of the project is different. So we will update those, but what's included in your packet are just some minor revisions to that bond ordinance. It repeals ordinance 1509, and essentially the biggest change is changing it to a 2020 series bond issue as opposed to a 2019.
Does this need to go in regular or feel no consent?
I feel like primary consent is just a...
Yeah, I don't think it's necessary to take this to a regular agenda. I think you could handle it on consent.
Okay. Then I would suggest,
Unless anyone's got any big concerns with it. It's essentially just changing the issue.
Yeah.
From the west side.
Yeah, there's no really issues of any substance. So consent.
consent, yeah.
All right. Thank you, Laura. Next up, we have replacement of frontline police department vehicles. Chief.
Gear gets heavier and heavier every day, I think. Appreciate your time tonight. I have a couple of things to discuss with you. The first is every 4 years we come back before the council to replace our frontline police cars that go out and drive the streets every single day, and after 4 years, retire. They're pushing about 100,000 miles because they run 24/7, 365 days a year. So, any action item, you will see a bid for 6 brand new Ford Explorers. That's generally what we do. We keep a couple of the older vehicles that are in the best shape, and that's what Kirk and Kevin do, is they determine which ones are the best ones to keep. So we kind of have newer and older vehicles. We usually do this towards the end of the year. There's a reason why we're here towards the beginning of the year, and I will tell you that the next action item that you're going to see on cameras will explain exactly why we're here in January and not later this year. The issue with going at the end of the year is that putting these cars together, we place the order now, and then it takes 3 to 4 months to get here, and then it takes a couple months to get them all built. And then I go to Brian, and we have to encumber the funds throughout the next year. The problem with going at this point in time is it's January 8th, and when you call Mark to get the bid for the cars, they can't find it. So, the bid that you have from Bob Allen Ford, we have been told that it is at or below the marked bid, which usually Shawnee Ford has. I know that Brian reached out to Clay County, Missouri, because they're the ones that were putting together the marked bid this year. Got some of the quotes on some of the vehicles. Our vehicle is not listed on there. So the quote that you have is just over, I believe, $40,000 per car. It's $40,663.36, and that is the price. And there is a quote in the packet from Bob Allen Ford. We are also switching out the in-car computers, the MDTs, modal data terminals that are in there, and going with Panasonic. We used R12 tablets in the past. Us and Overland Park were the only ones that used them. Turned out that was probably not a good choice at that time, and so we're going with Panasonic, which is, we have representatives here locally that we can reach out to. And then in there, in the price, is also what it would cost at KCOM to have everything outfitted in the vehicles. And it's not just getting the lights and all that stuff in the cars. There's rifles in the cars, cold fire extinguishers, and that's the other reason why Kirk and Kevin are here tonight is if you guys want to in-depth as to some of the equipment in the cars, we can do that too. But the total on those 6 cars, the modal data terminals, and the outfitting of the cars is $406,577.16 for 6 brand new police cars. Everything except for the cameras in the cars, which is the next thing we'll talk about. I'm happy to answer any questions that you guys have.
Questions for Chief?
Probably more of a question for Brian. Can you remind me why we look at a lease purchase instead of just buying these outright?
Cash flow.
Yeah, it's cash flow primarily, flexibility.
I think we would like to work towards having enough to be able to cash fund these, but we're not at that stage right now.
I'll discuss a little bit more of that when we talk about my items.
So you know the cars cost just over $40,000 just for the car. When we go to sell them, I believe we're getting about $7,000 back after 4 years. So.
Trey, did you have a question?
Yeah, I had a question.
Sure.
That 100,000 mile figure, is that pretty standard across the other departments?
So everybody goes about 3 to 4 years. I will tell you the Highway Patrol goes, I think it's 49,500 miles, and then they rotate their cars out. And a lot of departments buy their old cars. But once you start reaching 80 to 100,000 miles, we used to do every 3 to 4. When you hit year 4, depending on the amount of miles, you start running into the big service ticket items. And then that, we budget a certain amount for vehicle maintenance every single year. So 2020, vehicle maintenance should be lower, but by the time we get to 2024, vehicle maintenance will start going higher because you have transmissions and everything else that are going out that are big ticket. So.
Any other questions?
What are the lease
We
I
have
could probably-
another agenda item too. Item number 6 will discuss the lease purchase resolution. So I think we're gonna hear a couple options on that too.
No, I just want to see a little bit more of the terms, but I think I can take that offline with Brian.
No, we've got him as we
Yeah.
have, you're gonna get him.
Yeah, we'll discuss it, so.
Oh, sorry, I think, Claire, you have one more question?
Yeah, what makes you choose the Ford Explorer?
So if you noticed out in the parking lot several months ago, we had a Dodge Durango that was out there. Kind of an unproven. There's not a lot of departments that use the Durango. And one of the issues that we had, for you that have seen the insides of the cars, the sirens and the lights and all that stuff are right down here where the console's at. It's where the gear shift is. Creates a huge problem on how do we outfit the cars with the stuff that we need to have right here with the radio and everything when the gear shift's right there. So that was one major problem that we had. So.
Take it out of my consent.
Next up, we have the replacement of in-car video and body camera equipment. Chief.
Okay, so part 2. One of the main reasons the cars are going before you now, and I appreciate you all taking that into account. We use L3 Mobile Vision for our cameras, and that includes the in-car cameras, and it also includes the body cameras that the officers are wearing. We've had in-car cameras through L3 Mobile Vision for well over 10 years. Never had a problem with those. Body cameras first started coming out. We were probably one of the first third of the departments in Johnson County to get body cameras. And it was easier and cheaper to stay with L3 because we already had the in-car cameras and the server and everything else. One of the things that we mentioned in the action item was reliability issues. Captain Self from staff support manages all of our equipment, and we ordered 30 body cameras, and I will tell you that anywhere from a quarter to a third of those cameras were always being shipped back to New Jersey, and there they sat. And we waited for months for them to come back because they didn't work right. So with that being the case, and some of their servers are out of date, out of warranty, and you know I don't like things being out of warranty. That's why we wanted to bring the cars and everything else so that we can put it all together at one time. The server that goes with L3 has Band-Aids put on it to keep it going at this point because we didn't want to spend $20,000, $30,000 on a brand new server and then switch anyway, which is why we brought that. So as far as what we're doing, we reached out to 3 different companies to get bids. WatchGuard was the one in the middle. Panasonic was almost at 300,000, WatchGuard's at 176,000. And Axon, which is Taser, and obviously we have plenty of Tasers, was 152,000. Panasonic was extremely high, and as I told you, that's the people that are putting the NDTs in the cars. WatchGuard is somebody that we've looked at for the last 12 to 18 months. Several departments in Johnson County use WatchGuard, so we have gone out, field tested, and seen in other departments exactly what that looks like. And in our opinion, WatchGuard is the #1 product for us to go get. Everybody is now on Niche, which is the records management system. And this program is going to allow us to actually send digitally instead of printing out all of these DVDs. Every time there's a case, we will be able to send a link through WatchGuard straight out to the DA's office. So the amount of DVDs by the thousands that we have downstairs in storage won't be the case anymore. So, but with the WatchGuard program is going to put cameras in all the police cars, the motorcycles, and also get us 26 brand new body cameras. Next month, the only thing that's not in here is the server. Next month you will have a server from WatchGuard that we'll bring forward in an action item for you. But this will replace all the in-car cameras and all the body cameras.
Besides the field testing that we've done, I assume we've heard good things about WatchGuard from the folks using them, or?
So from the other departments that use it, and we've actually seen it in sunlight, low light. We have officers that are on the OSIT, the Officer Involved Shooting Team, that go and watch all of these videos from the other departments. And WatchGuard, in our opinion, is #1 from what we've seen.
So the original body cameras were purchased in 2015. And both the price of the WatchGuard system and the server, which will come next month, were accounted for in the 2020 budget.
Any other questions for Chief?
Oh, yeah. There's 26 cameras. How many police officers do we have?
So we have 31 officers.
So are there some that are rotated?
Essentially, you don't need the command staff usually when we're in the office. But there is 1 or 2 that's assigned to investigations, and the rest are all assigned to the officers themselves. So we're just hoping that they don't break.
Do our community development officers have them as well? Our, right, our
Neighborhood service
neighborhood
officers.
services, neighborhood officers, that's it. No, okay. I was wondering, oh yeah, I think it's really important that we have body cameras, and I'm glad that you make it a priority. Can you tell us what percentage of time our police officers have their active duty recorded?
So I would tell you, every time the lights come on in the cars, the in-car camera comes on. I don't know if that's something that WatchGuard can do with the body cameras or not.
There are several options, Chief. We're able to sync those body cameras, which is kind of slick. They are the only system, I think, that we looked at where the body camera is tied into the car camera. Not only tied into the individual car, but it can be clustered. So if you have an officer that arrives on a scene, it recognizes it as a separate camera and says, hey, you're part of this cluster, and it turns it on. Did I answer your question?
And as the policy is right now, anytime an officer has contact with the public, that body camera has to be on. So lots of the footage is never used, but it's always on.
Thank you. Great.
So I'll also make comment that we were budgeted $185,000, and again, we've been working on this for at least 18 months, and I will say that between Captain Self, Captain Lane, that trying to figure out with WatchGuard exactly what this is going to cost that far out in advance. We actually came in approximately $8,000 under budget. Now the server is going to come to you next month. It's just over $11,000, but that's going to come from a different capital line. So.
Good job.
Consent, on consent?
Well, we want to discuss the
Oh, yeah.
first. All right, so the question becomes, how do we pay for all of these things? And yes, they are big ticket items. As the chief mentioned, the video system was budgeted in the 2020 budget. As a single purchase item, it's $185,000. So our intent is just to make that a one-time purchase right out of the budget. Traditionally with the police vehicles, we do buy those every 4 years. The chief was explaining that's about the time they reach their optimal lifespan and due to be replaced before they start incurring expensive repairs. And it does become kind of a cash flow issue with having to purchase about $400,000 every 4 years or so. So traditionally we have done a lease purchase agreement. And what that entails is the city working with Ellers, our financial advisor. They put together an RFP. They'll actually solicit bids or quotes from financial institutions, Commerce Bank, US Bank, some other firms like that. They'll evaluate those proposals and they'll go with the best and lowest interest rate on the best terms. And then they present that to staff, we evaluate that with them. We also work with Bond Counsel, Gilmore & Bell to draft up documents that outline provisions and terms of those lease purchase agreements. Those are all signed off by the bank institution as well as you all before we actually close on the agreement. And then the monies are placed into an escrow account. And then when the police department goes to buy the vehicles, we simply send the invoice from Bob Allen directly to the bank and say, hey, this. So we never actually touch the money really. But it's a pretty slick process. Then at the end, we make a series of lease payments over the course of 4 years, and we make that final lease payment. We gain possession of the vehicles, especially the titles. So we'll have titles for these current Ford police cars in March. We make that final payment. If all goes well, once transition's done, we'll sell those and recoup some residual value in those. So with all of that said, I asked the folks at Ellers to run some numbers for us. They kind of gave us a couple of options. The first is $430,000, and that includes the purchase of the police vehicles, the equipment to outfit those police vehicles, and then the terminals, the computer terminals, and then cost for the actual issuance, which is the cost for Ellers and the bond console. So that's a total of about $430,000. And on the back side of that page, page 2, you can see the breakout of that. They took a very conservative estimate. They did an estimated interest rate of 2.5%. I anticipate it'll probably be much lower. But the final interest over 4 years would be just a little bit over $24,000. And then we asked them to back out the computer terminals, which brought us down to our second option on page 3, $385,000. And that would result in interest rate of 2.5% of just a little under $22,000 total over the 4 years. Again, I'd be shocked if it came in at 2.5%. The average, the last lease purchase we did for cardio equipment, about 1.5%. So I think it'll probably be a little bit higher than that. And it really is cash flow, and especially in an environment like this where interest rates are so low, it's almost like free money. And so,
And the other thing is, I think, as the mayor mentioned, I mean, in a perfect world, we would never pay any interest on these, right? We would just buy everything outright. And I think we've made progress, because the other thing that we're balancing is not just the capital for the police department, but for public works. And I think we've really made significant strides on the public works side of purchasing, of not least purchasing that equipment, even the larger, you know, trucks that are over. I think we did 2 trucks in last year for $110,000 apiece. So part of it is not only within the police department, but across the rest of the departments that are competing for those general fund resources for capital. And so we try to keep that ebb and flow over a series of years as consistent as we can, just to help with budgeting purposes more than anything else.
we have an equipment reserve account that we set up. And we did this 2020 budget, but the last several budgets, we put money towards that just for those purchases, primarily in the Public Works Department and a couple of the other departments that utilize vehicles. The goal eventually is to set up a systematic payment process where you're essentially, instead of making a lease payment, you're making a payment into that equipment reserve fund, setting aside that money. I struggle how to do that with the police department, frankly, because we're continually paying lease payments every 4 years, and then to set aside another $100,000 every year for that equipment reserve fund. It's a $200,000 lug on their budget. And so I've struggled with how to kind of work around that, so to speak.
But to your point, if we're able to borrow at 2% or right around there, that's it's pretty competitive. Yeah.
If it was 4%, I'd be feeling the angst that you're feeling too. But.
Yeah, and it looks like by pulling out the computers, that the most we'd save is $5,000 in interest in the issuance. And it sounds like the interest will be lower than that, so it's really kind of
Did we actually act on the last item?
No, we did not.
They want to come back to them as a group.
Yeah, that's what I'm wondering, is
Yeah.
we can put them all under consent
Yep.
as a group.
Or if you want the
Well,
resolution, you'll have to.
Yeah, the watch guard, I mean, the 4 and 6 are tied together. The watch guard is an outright cash purchase.
Right.
So you could, that could be standalone, and then if you want to, authorize us to proceed with the purchasing and authorize us to proceed with the financing transaction
Yeah,
for the vehicles and equipment.
okay. But I think that all 3 items should be on consent.
Any other questions for Brian? All right. Next up, we have our personnel policy and guidelines update. Emily.
Thank you. We wanted to, as we discussed in previous meeting, bring to you some of the more traditional types of items for revision to the personnel policy and guidelines update for 2020. You have those in your packet. We did a few updates. One, that has the most bullet points is the addition of more inclusive pronouns throughout the document. We also included changes that were related to the new electronic timekeeping system that we've implemented with Paycor. It just led to some changes that were specifically called out in how time is calculated, but the goal always being to get as close to exactly accurate, dollars paid for hours worked. And some of those had been kind of based on paper tracking instead of the way we can do it now. So new tools led to some changes in that type of tracking, really, for time. We also just softened, I would say, the language around self-owned policies, just recognizing that most of us do some portion of checking for personal business, but wanted to still maintain the right of supervisors to either restrict if they think it's necessary based on job duties, or to discipline if it becomes excessive. So we left that leeway in there, but made it just a little bit more accommodating for today's world, where we all have them with us always. I don't know, so there were a number of typos caught in the review from the agenda, which I appreciate. We'll go through that and adjust those. They were not substantial, they do not have substantial impact. They are editing errors that we will address. So then we did want to follow up. We, at previous conversations, had talked about going back to our, in terms of especially leave policies, vacation, personal time off, etc., going to our staff with a benefits survey. So we've dusted off the last one that we've looked at and just kind of wanting to get closer to what our employees viewing as most attractive and ways we could incorporate that into future revisions of the personnel guideline document. So these were ones that would be typical of kind of any year's update. So we wanted to address those and get them in place following the implementation of the electronic timekeeping, but we'll come back with more substantial.
Questions for Emily?
It's good work. I just looked through it. It's a lot of detail.
Wordy.
Yes.
Yeah, but it's good. If you know, you get more post-its on your copy that way.
Consent.
Consent.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, next we have the contract for our 2020 Direction Chapter Survey with ETC Institute. Laura.
Yes, so ETC Institute is a local firm that has worked with municipalities really across the country using a variety of survey instruments, including their Direction Finder tool, to assess citizen satisfaction with municipal services. We, as a city, have used Direction Finder in 2007, 11, and 15. We've been on a 4-year cycle, and I think it's been very beneficial for us to go out and assess and use the information that we collect through that process in our decision making. Why Direction Finder as opposed to some other tools? I think the benefit in why we're recommending continuing with the Direction Finder process is that this is something that they have standardized, and it allows us not only to look at our performance individually as a city of Mission, but it allows us to benchmark ourselves. Most of the other cities, particularly in Johnson County, use the Direction Finder survey. And so we're really able to see where we have similarities or differences in terms of citizen satisfaction in all of our key service delivery areas. So it gives us an opportunity, and then there's also a national component of that as well. So we kind of get a 3-tier look through the Direction Finder process that we can use. I know some of the conversations that I've had with some on the council and thinking about it myself is I think 4 years is maybe too long to go to assess satisfaction with some things, and there are a lot of other tools on the marketplace that are very affordable that could provide us with opportunities to assess citizen satisfaction or garner citizen input throughout the year on a more frequent and ongoing basis. And so we're pulling together some information and research, and we'll look at that as we move this forward. But the Direction Finder is something that was contemplated as part of our comprehensive plan update, so we wanted to bring this to you now so that we will be positioned to marry that up with Confluence's process as we move that forward. One of the other things about ETC, if you haven't, the previous surveys are on the website, available on the website, but they do guarantee a statistically valid survey response. So that gives you as policymakers a level of comfort in your decision making. With that, survey questions, again, they have kind of a standard set of questions on the Direction Finder side, but we will have the opportunity to craft specific questions to be added to that survey. If there are, in the past, we've asked questions about downtown redevelopment. We've asked questions about housing types and need for specific housing types. We've asked questions about streets have come out as a #1 priority consistently through our Direction Finder process. And in the 2015 process, we asked people specifically some questions about how much would they be willing to pay, how much additional tax burden would they be willing to take on. And I think that was very helpful in the council as we looked at transitioning from the transportation utility fee to a mill levy conversion to help support our street maintenance program. So we can drill down and get some of that specific information. So we did have funds in the amount of $16,000 in the 2019 budget. Those will have now rolled over into the general fund balance, but are recommended to be reallocated for 2020 for this project. The price did increase. They have a little bit of a price increase every year, so it went up to $16,500, but we recommend approval of that contract for 2020.
I have a question for you. If we end up going through with the Crux project directed earlier, is there any overlap with this, or would they be able to talk to each other to be able to share some of those results, or potentially?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think there's some things there. I also think there's some things that we could, survey. I think we've talked about, there's an opportunity, there may be things that come out of your retreat or your goal setting that you want to incorporate into this year's Direction Finder survey. But I think what we found with past Direction Finder surveys is we get the information back, and then there's always that question about, well, what does this mean? Or, we've started down a path and we want to collect a little bit more information. And I think that's part of what, from my perspective, is appealing about creating some of these ongoing mechanisms so that we don't wait another 4 years to follow up and see how the sentiment may have changed or shifted or where the residents' priorities will be. I mean, I will tell you consistently, streets have been absolutely at the top of the list. Trails have been at the top of the list. One of the things that has changed over time, when we did the first Direction Finder survey, there was an absolute identification of a need for senior housing. It resulted in us pursuing some things like the Wellstone development in Mission Square. When we did the Direction Finder, I don't remember what was the 11, probably the 15, senior housing went to the bottom of the list. And that was, a direct response to kind of what we had seen in that market. And so we're able to sort of track some of those kinds of things over time. But again, I know Celia has mentioned, for example, in Olathe, I think they do the Direction Finder every year.
Quarterly.
Yeah. Which Celia says is too much. I would agree for a city our size. Shawnee, for example, does it every 2 years, I believe. So, but I think finding those tools, and again, not incurring this expense every year, but looking at some other ways for us to do that in ways that can provide the staff and council with consistent feedback and what we feel like is reliable or valid
This is
feedback.
also a census year, is it not?
Yes, it is. Yes.
Yeah, and this is something I've shared with you, Laura, and perhaps it's something that will be part of the comprehensive plan, but I think it'd be really nice to see some of the Direction Finder deliverables, how those questions guided some of our actions over the past 4 years. I think that is something that could help constituents understand that their input actually had an effect. And how that's done, I don't want to create a bunch of work for staff, but I feel like that could be part of the comprehensive plan, complementing the Direction Finder, just as well.
And what are we going to do to market this to make sure that people respond besides what they're going to do as far as following up? Are we going to, I think we talked a little bit about putting it in the Mission Magazine.
I think we can advertise that people will,
media.
and that will be one of those things I think that we can kind of talk about with Confluence in the meeting next week, is where in your process. Initially, in some of the proposals, I think the Direction Finder survey was kicking in about the 90-day mark in the comprehensive planning process. But as we put that time frame together, then we can build what is our plan to get the information out, to encourage people to participate once they receive it. Now, not every household is going to get that survey, so it's a little bit of a balance to say, how come I didn't?
Where's mine? That's
Yeah.
important.
And so we have to manage those expectations just a little bit, but I think we've had, success, and quite honestly, in the past, they've not had to do, so if they don't get return response via mail, or I think now they drive people a little bit more online than they have even 4 years ago. They will do follow-up phone calls, so they know where their surveys are going, and they'll get those. But they haven't had to really do much of that in Mission, because I think our residents have been, really responsive and eager to participate in that process. But that's the little bit of the delicate balance that our tightrope that we walk with the Direction Finder.
That's a good point. Okay, great, thank you.
Any other questions?
Consent, yes.
All right. Now we have our ordinance repealing section 270 of the municipal code, capital improvement program committee.
This is coming back to you. We discussed it at a previous meeting as well. This is the the recommendation to approve the ordinances required to disband the Capital Improvement Program Committee. As we discussed in the past, we're always evaluating the value that our community work brings, and we've had conversations with the members of the committee and with you all, and internally among staff, that perhaps this mechanism isn't serving us the way that we had hoped it would. So we're recommending to you that you would pass this, which would formally remove it from our code, and the committee would be no more.
Questions?
Consent.
All right. I just
Can
want,
we do consent on an ordinance or?
Yep, you can.
I just want to thank those who have served on the CIP committee, and I think staff had conveyed before that those who are still interested in serving will find landing spots on other boards and commissions.
I'm sure it had something to do with the liaisons.
That's right, it's as soon as those guys are there. And I would say too, since Mr. Arnett is in the audience, he's one of the members of the committee, he and I have spoken a number of times, and the information sharing was very valuable. So they're not, and none of the members that we're serving are going anywhere, and it was also helpful for staff. We've, had our presentations in order, and it was good to review and ask questions, so none of that is a waste, and that information stays with our residents, so that's great.
Thank you.
Thank you, John.
Do we have on discussion items or none? And then on other department updates, do we have any additional department updates?
I think we covered everything under CDC, unless anybody has any questions about.
All right. And then that concludes our Finance and Administration Committee.
Thank you.